Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We've got an exciting special here. We've got Lionheart with us. We're going to be talking about some various Total War Warhammer things. We've only got 18 days till release, which, as I imagine, is keeping you very busy over there across the ocean, Lionheart.
Yeah, lots to be getting on with and getting ready for, really. So, yeah, busy.
Yeah, so I just had a couple questions I'd like to run through. Various things I've been thinking about the game, various things I noticed other people. Obviously, we've gotten to see you play some games, which have been really exciting. Those have been a big joy to watch.
I'm glad you enjoyed the battles I've been able to be a part of.
Yeah, really exciting. If it's all right, I think I'll start with the most obvious and go into the Bretonia versus Vampire Counts fight everybody watched about, what, 2 weeks ago almost now?
Yeah, something like that. Yep.
All right. First of all, very excited. At least I am to see that Bretonia is going to be playable. That was big news. And you got to be the first person that, at least publicly, that got to have your hands on him, which is pretty awesome. So,
Yeah.
the first thing I'd like to ask is, before we get too much into that particular game, the last time we talked, there was a lot of questions I wondered about for potential Total War players, like how different the game was going to feel. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts, before we get to like Magic and Monsters, about maybe things that caught you off guard, or things that were different that you didn't necessarily expect, that weren't quite as obvious as the completely new systems.
Well, from the various kind of opportunities I've had to play the game in preview so far at various Creative Assembly events and capture days and at gaming conventions, there's like a very noticeable difference in the pace of battles between the various factions. The Vampire Counts are, obviously no missile troops there, so you kind of have this rush to engage in the melee quite quickly and then get your flying units around as flankers and your monstrous creatures in there as well. Whereas the dwarves, very much kind of the opposite of that, slower, defensive. They can still be, you can still use them offensively, and it'll definitely be interesting to see some tactics with them employed as a kind of. I mean, I'd love to see someone try like a dwarven like rush build or something like that. I'm sure it's possible in some capacity, but right from the get-go, especially with those two factions, I almost say polar opposites in terms of the battle pacing. Vampire Counts feels very quick. I wouldn't say feels similar to previous Total Wars. I know kind of battles seemingly in Total Wars over the years have got faster and faster. Vampire Counts, I wouldn't say have got even faster than that, but then compared to the dwarves, it's hard to explain, but there's very different, slower pacing to it, which really kind of fits in with that kind of, you can really role play as a dwarf, where you can, really get in behind this kind of evil vampire kind of rush tactic. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's kind of impacted me, because they just do feel very different. I mean, it's not the same as different factions playing a little bit differently in previous titles. Again, because we're not just dealing with humans, we're dealing with monstrous creatures and dwarves of so a lot smaller and stouter. There really is that quite big impact and difference when you do get into battle. I mean, thinking of kind of other things that have really grabbed me, I guess it would be the inclusion of monstrous creatures, single entity units. We're very familiar with 100, 120, 200 man unit sizes for your basic infantry, archers, and cavalry. But now you have these single entity units, not just for big, huge monstrous creatures, but for legendary lords as well, and your custom characters, your lords, your heroes, your mages, and things like that. And that just adds another layer to it with these individual units, and also weighing up kind of the pros and cons of, do I want to have an 18 stack army full of regular troops and then a couple of agents embedded into my army that I'm actually then going to bring to the field? Am I going to sacrifice potentially 100 units for this one guy or lady that could influence the battle? And again, obviously to get into magic and stuff later on. But again, magic adding a very a whole nother layer, especially in my Britonia battle. Certainly something which Darren showed he had a better understanding of, and had kind of gotten used to using that more, obviously with more playtime and more hands-on that he has, obviously as one of the guys that works at the studio. I was rushing around trying to just play a regular Total War kind of type battle, but I had all these opportunities to some magic. Some opportunities I took, and some I didn't. And obviously, sort of something like that, playing that again, keeping an eye on my magic and the right times and the right spells, just adds a whole nother layer to battles, and very enjoyable.
Yeah. So speaking of some of the new features, I guess we'll start with monsters. Because I'm guessing, obviously, you don't want to delve into it because I don't want you to be on the spot for anything you're not allowed to talk about. But if you've had a chance to play with some of them, like maybe the Vargeist or the Vargolfs or the Giants or whatever, how has been adapting to these new creatures that are just one big scary thing that just have ridiculous impact from what I've seen? Just every video that you see them fighting around in, they're just sending entire units flying with every swing, and their charge impacts look like they're just absolutely absurd. How is adjusting to dealing with these gargantuan creatures that are just stomping around on everybody?
I probably would have had to say I've in a way had a bit of experience with these sorts of units in the past, just through experience with kind of something like the Third Age mod. It's that certainly given me a feel for how to try and deal with these creatures, because again, often in Third Age and very similar in Warhammer, when I've had a chance to get hands on, these units can tie up 3 or 4 traditional 120 man units quite easily, and often either the AI or the player you're playing against will commit a fair few units against that single entity unit to try and bog it down or just do enough damage to bring it down. I think the real combination to bring them down is either focusing one of your monstrous creatures at it, or single entity units, backed up with some magic and some spells or augments or hexes. I mean, Darren showcased a great way of taking down my Pegasus Knights by popping off his hex just as his guys came in.
That was so brutal.
Looked like they dropped, and again, it wasn't until after the battle that I kind of realised what he'd done, because I just thought this Terrorgeist had come in and flapped its wings a few times and just wrecked my Pegasus, which to a degree it had, but it was massively boosted by the huge amount of armour debuff that I was suffering because of the hex that he timed perfectly. So I think that's very much going to be quite a staple kind of counter, I guess, to it, to those sorts of creatures. But yeah, monstrous creatures, they've got a massive impact, and they certainly do a lot of damage, but equally kind of at the same time, you're going to want to know when the right time is to commit those troops, because again, that is one whole unit that's taking up a slot in your army, and if you lose that one unit, if it hasn't been effective, then that's been quite it's not been very cost effective.
Right. Yeah, and we can definitely see that, in that video, for instance. It seems like Darren did not get as much mileage out of his Cryptors, which spent most of their time battering down the wall and then getting torn apart by your Men-at-Arms and Lionheart, who had that wonderful graphic of just impaling one in the face, as opposed to the Terrorgeist, which got a bunch of mileage and just did tragic amounts of damage. But I would say, it seemed like Britonia was almost probably the most difficult faction to play against the Vampire Counts, in the sense that Britonia seems to rely, especially in a siege, where Britonia is so reliant on lots and lots of cavalry, and yet you had to be 30 places at once trying to defend your walls, when it probably would have been easier to be managing an open field where you could really bring your cavalry to full effectiveness. Especially with the Terrorgeist flying around, and the Pegasus Knights unfortunately got wiped out pretty quick due to the magic and the Fellbats and the Terrorgeist all piling in on them. And and CA didn't. I was sad not to see Biaki in the battle, but I imagine that had to do a lot with CA not wanting to show off Lanker's Hippogriff mount just yet.
Yeah.
That being said, though, really, it seems like the game has a really good feel to it. Like I know a lot of people are nervous about this release, just because it's CA and everyone talks about Rome 2 like it happened yesterday, even though it was actually quite a long time ago. Would you say that your time playing the games like felt really good and like it's not just good editing or whatever, but it actually like has a good feel to it? It looks like it's chalking up well.
Yeah, I mean, so far, I've been hesitant with my kind of analysis and impressions since I guess announcement. Um, Obviously, there's still a lot in the community that are very wary of whatever CA are working on next. Following on from Rome 2. That said, kind of Attila came through and had quite a quiet launch and a pretty solid launch for the most part. Um, but obviously, there is still, with them really changing things up so much with this game, there is a lot of concern kind of about, will it run well? Is it going to present well? Is it going to be stable? Is it going to be a flop? Is it going to be another Rome 2 sort of thing? Obviously, they have delayed by a month, which they said, they wanted to give reviewers more time with the game. And obviously, one would assume that they're also working on polishing and tweaking the game in that time, which is a great stance to see. From my hands-on time, obviously it's all kind of development in progress, work in progress builds, so I don't know how kind of fully representative it is of the final game, but it seems really solid. I haven't come across any major issues. I know quite a few pointed out a couple of little spelling mistakes here and there on the Amulet of Sea Gold. I think
Yes,
poor was the word.
the poor undead.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, I mean, performance-wise, it seems to be running better than Attila. Obviously, until I can get an FPS counter up on my own build and do some rigorous testing. I mean, that's something I'm quite looking forward to actually doing. I mean, almost a bit of a quite a hard choice for me. Like, do I want to jump straight into doing Let's Plays as soon as I can get access, or do I want to do some benchmarks? And I kind of feel like I want to do some benchmarks because I've always said going through, it's great that they've expanded into this different different fantasy setting, and really trying a lot of different things, but and offering a lot of different content. But ultimately, if it doesn't run well, it's almost pointless because
Right.
you can't appreciate any of that. But yeah, it seems to be running well. The machines I've tried out at CA Studios when I have got hands on are pretty powerful. We're talking GTX 980s, 980 Ti's, Titans. So this is very much at the the very high end of what users can
Right.
afford and potentially build PCs around. But as I said, it seems to be running well. I mean, I don't believe for a minute that the kind of recommended specifications that they announced, saying that you'll get 60 FPS solid at 1080, is accurate. There's going to be points where you're zooming in over a huge fight and the FPS is going to dip. I would assume that either relates to a basic benchmark, which, if we go via the benchmarks that we've seen in Attila and Rome 2, the benchmarks themselves are a really good tool to compare across different systems, but they're not all the time that good of a representation of the actual game, because often the camera is kind of going over an optimum flight path, as it were, where it's going to get kind of a quite solid average FPS all the way through, which is great for testing purposes, obviously, but not, in my opinion, a kind of the best representation for how the game's going to run. And I would assume that statement of 1080 60 FPS kind of guaranteed sort of thing is from a benchmark of a very scripted flyover. I'll be wanting to jump into game and seeing what the FPS is like when I've got 20 versus 20 units all engaged at the same time, zoomed right into the action. Okay, we don't have as much matched combat animations, which I'm actually quite a fan of, that we've moved away from that. We've gone back to kind of a Medieval 2 system. I think it works with the health system that's been tweaked and re-implemented to a certain degree, again, from kind of previous titles for Warhammer, and it makes sense, again, with single entity units and things like that as well. So, not having all those animations popping off at the same time and drawing units in, that's probably going to help reduce the FPS impact. But obviously you've got increases in fidelity and unit detail and lots of separate animations just going on for the units' kind of ambient actions and things like that.
Right, and magic will definitely be throwing a wrench in there as well.
Chain lightning that I threw down in the Bretonia battle looked glorious. It looked absolutely stunning. So, but I'm sure that's going to be quite a resource-intensive thing. But all that aside, it seems, from my experience, kind of comparing that to when I played Attila, both on my home system and at CA Studio, it seems to be running better. So performance seems solid at the moment. The builds I've played seem solid, and I hope that the launch will be solid as well for it. I expect the odd bug here and there. It's a PC launch, and
Well,
it's
it's
a
not going
Total
to be
War
perfect.
launch.
Yeah.
They've never been perfect. Not even the original ones that we all love so much. Um, but yeah, I'd say I'm probably quietly confident that it's going to be a reasonable performer and relatively well optimized. Again, they've got DirectX 12 as well now, which isn't which and 64-bit engine, which isn't a magic switch to thousands of FPS. It's not a magical solution. That is going to probably ultimately come with a brand new engine, kind of done from the ground up, and all the new technologies implemented. Rather than kind of being kind of just tried to be meshed into there to work. But I think it's certainly a great step forward with both of those technologies, 64-bit and DirectX 12, and I'm definitely going to be looking forward to testing those when the game's out.
Yeah, well, and it seems like, I would definitely say with very good confidence after yesterday that CA has been going a very pro-consumer route with this game, and that, not only have they listened, I mean, they've been listening to the community phenomenally, which I didn't expect to this level of that. Now the game's moddable, which it sounds like they finally managed to get GW to turn their opinion on that over, which is big, in my opinion, just knowing how GW tends to work. And also expanding the Chaos DLC for a full week. It seems like everything's really lining up for this to be potentially, if the launch goes well, one of probably the biggest Total War game in a really, really long time.
I personally think it's going to be the biggest Total War game, just because you've got now the heritage of Total War. People know what Total War's about, and now you're drawing it into a massive fantasy environment. I mean, the number of people I see that are Warhammer fans commenting saying this is the game that they've waited 15, 20 years for is insane, and it's great to see.
Oh yeah,
I
well,
think,
I'm definitely one of those people.
yeah,
you
I mean, I
know,
think this is really gonna. I'm hoping this will take Total War to new heights. And I mean, I guess for those that just, someone that would say that, the hardcore history nuts of Total War, just those that aren't interested in Warhammer or fantasy at all, I kind of see this as it's still a very worthwhile experience because it's allowing them to try out different things. And I think a very good example of that is with the regional occupation design choice that they've gone with. They're trying something different there, and while it might, in fact, it has kind of conflicted with many fans of whether they feel that the opportunity to paint the map in your own color is a core Total War feature or not, kind of versus offering something that will drive you towards certain directions and not others. I think it's something they need to experiment with, and if it is a good thing, then great. I'd love to see some other kinds of thinking and design process come out of that. But if it isn't, again, I hope it's a learning experience that just ensures that future games in the series, both fantasy, Warhammer, and historical, all benefit from, basically.
right?
I think it's important that, whether ultimately it's a good design choice or a bad design choice, it needs to happen because it's a learning process. And I would say we learn through our mistakes, which I think Rome 2 is a very solid evidence of. They've certainly, this isn't the same kind of view or approach that they had with Rome 2. It's a lot different. As you said, it's very kind of pro-consumer, and that they're getting a lot of interaction with the community where possible, and they're trying to bring as many people kind of in and on board as possible before launch.
Yeah. Well, they've been very communicative throughout the process. I mean, I still remember waiting for Rome 2 to come out, and there wasn't nearly as much information. You could only find maybe a couple of Twitch streams and maybe a couple of YouTube videos, but nothing on the scale of this. I mean, this has been, like, absolutely crazy how much stuff is just out there to check out the game, and we're still, I'm sure that we're not going to really be getting the really big hammer reviews till probably a week, 2 weeks before launch, which we're almost there, but still not quite. So, I mean, personally, I've been really, really impressed with how CA's been conducting themselves during this entire process. I know it hasn't. I can't imagine it's been easy for them, especially with like the whole chaos, free LC debacle, and all this other stuff. And they've done such a fantastic job, in my opinion, of keeping their chins up, despite all of the controversy, to say without a doubt. But that being said, kind of turning our attention back to, so I just gotta ask, how like are the characters like super fun, and is it really easy to like have a good idea of like where to use them and where they need to be? And is it exciting? Do you miss them having like their little bodyguard units or being more vulnerable? Like, I'm really, really curious, and I've talked to quite a few people who are as well, about how the characters are feeling with these kind of isolated little islands of people who can do all sorts of crazy things to change how your army feels.
I mean, I think it very much ties into the more, I guess, evident focus on abilities and then bringing magic into it. That especially spellcasters are very key, and they certainly feel important. Melee specialists like the paladin, for example, in the Bretonia battle. They're a tank unit. You can throw them in, and they can support other units quite well. They've got augments to pop off, which will increase their armor and their damage output momentarily, before they kind of reset on cooldown and things like that. I don't know if I wouldn't have minded maybe somewhere along their skill tree seeing an option to, I don't know, maybe get like a bodyguard kind of attachment of like perhaps 10 or 12 elite kind of units added to them, just to give them, I don't know, kind of a little bit more to them, or the ability to potentially embed them into. Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that something you can do in the tabletop of kind of?
Yeah, it's a huge feature in the tabletop.
That is something I would like to see them patch in, because I kind of feel that there is a missed opportunity by not including that at the moment.
Yeah, well, it seems weird because I know because I checked that earlier in development, Grimgor Ironhide had the Immortals unit as an upgrade.
Bodyguard, yeah.
Yeah, and now that it's a unit banner, and he can't join the unit anymore, so I'm guessing they must have somehow ran into some sort of balance issue or something.
Yeah, I mean, that is potentially a problem. I would have thought that then to get around that, it would be you attach them. You would attach them to an existing unit as such, and they would gain a percentage stat increase across the board, sort of thing. And when you pop your Lord's abilities, it maybe has a small aura around that unit. I think that's something they should definitely look at.
Oh yeah, well, especially when we get armies coming in. Well, the only thing I could see that causing a problem with, which is I agree with that actually. Like, I prefer the idea of characters sort of being around units. The only thing I can see is that they probably have to, I guess, nerf them substantially, because I'm assuming if you can't target them with like shooting or units or something, and they just become really hard to single out, they could probably become a problem, especially wizards. Tabletop. In tabletop, yes, we can put our guys in units, but 9 times out of 10 we do that to hide them. It's not necessarily to make the unit better; it's to protect the character.
Something. So I guess maybe then in that case you'd have to be able to do. You'd have to do it at the same time you equip banners, which is on the before you actually load into a battle. So you could potentially keep your legendary lords separate, or your lord separate, or drag and drop them on top of a unit, which would attach them like a banner almost, and they would appear as the captain of that unit in the center of that unit.
Yeah,
or something,
but that's definitely I'd like to see explored. Speaking of which, I've seen this come up a lot recently, especially since the Bretonia video, of there's been some criticism from some people. Obviously, they haven't had time to play it, so I've been taking it with a grain of salt. But a lot of people seem concerned that there's almost too much active abilities in the game, and that sometimes it looks like people are just clicking on their characters and just spamming all of their abilities that have a cooldown, especially on fighting characters. And like, it almost seems like there's almost, because the battle pace is fairly quick, there's almost little time to read them, and that it's just click, 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 and then just move on and just keep doing it. And that magic seems the only one that seems to have a bother of strategically using. And I wasn't sure if someone who's actually had hands-on with the game, if you agree with that, and that it seems like it's a little much and just sort of a spam fest, or if it's more to it than that.
You know what, yeah, actually I would probably agree. I think the augments in the battles that I've had them, I mean, I guess those are representative of legendary lords quite later on in their skill trees where they've got them. So probably through a single player perspective, it's probably a bit more balanced because you've had to level that lord up, and then I guess when you get to that point where you can pop 3 augments very close after one another, that's because your lord's at level 30 or whatever. But for custom battles, yeah, I was kind of constantly coming back and pop, 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 pop. All the augments going, any kind of way of increasing their stats momentarily. And I don't know, sometimes they felt like they were making an impact, and sometimes it's just like, oh, it's not really doing much, it seems. Again, I don't know if that's because obviously final balancing isn't in and what have you. It does kind of make them seem like they're very kind of quick throwaway abilities rather than something special to be a bit more careful and selective over when you do it. I think, I don't know, maybe they should have substantially longer cooldowns so that I've really got to think when is the best time to time this, rather than, oh, it's going to be back in 20 seconds, so it doesn't matter if I, popped it at the wrong time or whatever.
Right. Well, and it
so
definitely... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that maybe slightly longer cooldowns on those, but again, I need to kind of wait and see what the final balancing is, because maybe that's something that was intended, but just wasn't in the build that I played.
I know my thoughts on it. Obviously, I haven't played it myself, so I advise anyone to take also a grain of salt with it. Is that I'm guessing that in multiplayer or custom and multiplayer powers, where they say like your characters tend to be really high level automatically, I could see it being really overwhelming that you just like have abilities. But I know I watched the live stream with Joey yesterday where she had Grimgore, and it looks like it takes a really long time to get like more than one. As you're building up your character. So maybe it just seems like a lot when you just kind of get thrown into a battle and you're like, okay, I got this new character and I don't know like exactly when these will be best. But it also could be, I don't know what the Paladin's abilities did. I haven't had the time to sit down and like view that in detail. But I almost wonder if they maybe have gone a little bit too hard on the abilities that are like, increase this statistic by a certain percentage for this amount of time, as opposed to abilities that have more oomph to them, like Heinrich Kemmler's ability where he increases the winds of magic immediately, or Thorgrim's ability in a long time ago Battle of Thundering Falls where he shot a fireball. A very noticeable, immediate ability that draws attention and has a big effect. I think maybe those small stat boost abilities might tend to be the kind where people are just going to spam them as fast as they can when they come off cooldown.
Yeah, definitely agree.
But, like you said, I have no idea what this is going to look like on the 28th. It could be that it's like a huge stat increase and maybe the cooldowns are longer or whatever. Certainly a lot to see. Have you... one thing I would ask, and you may not have an answer to this one, I'm not sure. Have you noticed if you've had the opportunity to play with some character... what I'm asking about is when characters upgrade for various mounts... I don't know if you've had a chance to try a character who was like on foot and then on a horse or something like that. Is there any like beyond noticeable difference beyond just speed, or is it more to it than that? I don't know if you've had an opportunity to play around with that yet.
I mean, my only kind of experience with that was the Vampire Counts preview event I went to, which I think it was back in February, I think. And it was a 30-turn campaign as Vampire Counts, and I managed to get Manfred up to his barded horse, so I had him on foot for, the good part of the first 20-odd turns, and then I'd leveled him up enough or chosen the skill trees enough to get to the barded horse. And really, I mean, it obviously just massive speed increase, far more maneuverable in battle, and had a bit more kind of obviously of a charge impact. There, I guess... It'll go to another level when you can go to a flying mount, but that's not something I've really had a lot of chance.
Right,
to
I've heard his zombie
out.
dragon is probably like super late tier. I imagine.
Can't wait to try that out.
Yeah, they've been so. I tweeted Craig not too long ago. He was asking like what people want to see, and it's like you have a dragon in this game. You have 2 dragons in this game. We haven't seen either of them. But yeah, because that's something I'm definitely interested to see, is like if there's like really a benefit to keeping your guys on foot, or if everyone's just going to be upgrading those mount options as soon as they get them. Of course, I imagine that there are certain things that become more effective, like spearmen or halberds or something like that, probably become more efficient versus mounted characters. But I wonder if that's a big enough trade-off to not just always immediately take the mount upgrade.
Yeah, I mean potentially. I think I think um, I don't know if you can toggle them out on and off um, through your kind of skills or details for your hero, but if that is something you can do, then that might well be kind of another layer of tactical choice that you make if you're going up against a force that you know has got a lot of kind of anti-large or spears or something. You may want to actually dismount for that battle, as it were,
Yeah.
to then kind of face them on foot where you're not disadvantaged. But yeah, I don't know if that's a thing. I would hope that it is.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be nice. Um, Speaking of cavalry, it seems like, and I don't know if it seems like cavalry. To me, it looks like they feel ridiculously good in this game. Like all the charges that we've gotten to see hit so hard. Like I just feel bad for all the dwarves and all the chaos videos I see when the dwarves are just getting thrown around like sacks of grain as the cavalry slams into them. It seems like cavalry are disgustingly good in this game, at least for disrupting formations, if nothing else.
Yeah, it looks like they've really. I mean, especially since the Battle of Blackfire Pass video, which we saw ages ago now. They said that they were really working on making cavalry impacts punchier. I've had a couple of times where impacts didn't seem to kind of properly smash through, but I would say 9 times out of 10, uh, impacts with cavalry have been really, really solid and have sent units flying. You know, they've even been enough. I think it was Darren showed in his siege of Altdorf. He charged in with I think it was the Black Knights, and he went through one unit with the force of the charge and into the unit behind
Right. Hmm.
with the impact. So, I mean, I think it's very quite seems quite close to Shogun 2's cavalry charge impacts. Um, and in fact, I was playing a battle on Empire Total War earlier today, and I was watching the cavalry charge there, and timed right, the cavalry charge sent units flying very similar to how they're kind of presented in Warhammer from what I've seen preview wise. I think it was kind of toned down a fair bit in Rome 2, a little bit more punchier in Attila and Age of Charlemagne if you've got those wedge formations and charge bonuses going. But yeah, this really seems to have some proper punch behind those charges and infantry charges as well. If timed well, they really launch themselves in against their opponents.
Right. Um, well, that's certainly good because I mean my first playthrough is dwarf, so I'm kind of on the opposite end of like I know a lot of the dwarf community's been seeing all these cap charges sitting there like our army's looking a bit worried at this point because I know one complaint that I saw was a lot of people were concerned in Darren's video where he fought the dwarves, and the way he kills Ungrim is he just keeps running him over again and again and again to keep staggering him. And Ungrim just never gets up before he gets killed. Um, and I almost wonder. I hope CA's heard that and is making changes. I know I'm doing Thorgrim Grudgebearer as my first just because I love Thorgrim, but I'm also kind of like, hopefully up on my lofty throne of power, people aren't going to be knocking me over. But I almost worry a lot for the foot heroes like Ungrim, who look like Cav almost can be a little bit too much of a threat in that they can sort of disable attacks back by just constantly plowing into people. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that subject.
So I mean, yeah, I guess. I guess yeah, there may well be the need to potentially rebalance the charging impact a little bit because I don't think I've seen it too much myself, but I can totally appreciate where you're kind of coming from. That there may well be a tendency that you could just kind of keep on launching those charges, and you'd have to really commit a lot of troops to bog down some cavalry units before they'd actually completely stop. I mean, it looks like you're not going to take the penalty that you did in Attila for pulling cavalry out of an engagement. They get absolutely slaughtered in Attila, which actually I hated. I didn't think that was totally fair. Yeah, sure, you'd lose a couple of cavalry units, but to make it so that your unit is, again, like 90% of the time is going to break, trying to withdraw from an engagement, especially when you've just charged in with your cavalry and you want to pull out and rinse and repeat,
Which is
very
a
effective,
very viable strategy. Yeah.
Yeah, and a very effective tactic in Medieval 2, which again, a lot of similarities between Medieval 2 and Warhammer. I feel, cavalry would get tied up in Medieval 2, but you wouldn't lose the whole unit, and they certainly wouldn't break or shatter straight away, which was incredibly frustrating for me, and I know many other players in Attila. So
Well, I would hope not, especially since there's some cav heavy armies like
I
Bretonia
think there
coming
probably
in.
needs, yeah. I mean, I think there needs to be some middle ground, but again, I think it's probably I need to kind of wait and see a little bit more of how effective those kind of anti-cav units or anti-large units work against repeated cavalry charge. But I would hope that even a solid charge head-on against spearmen, the spearmen are going to be able to dig in and force them back.
Yeah, well, and one criticism I had of the people who were freaking out about the Ungrim video was that the dwarf army was very specifically not well designed for handling large. Like, the dwarf army wasn't built to handle them, and the chaos army was almost exclusively armor piercing, which is like anti-dwarf. So the dwarves, I think Darren ended up playing. Yeah, he did. He played from the dwarf perspective. I think he said he played 9 times and only won 2 of the games because it was so difficult from the dwarf perspective. So I think some people might have gotten a little carried away, which is understandable. I mean, if all you have is like 2 YouTube videos to base your opinion off of, people like to hit the panic button as quick as they can, especially on the forums.
Yeah, yeah.
Another thing, so Magic is looking pretty good. I have heard rumors that they're intending to buff it, because I know one thing that I saw that was kind of weird was that occasionally someone would use one of those big spells like Archeon when he uses Burning Head in the Chaos video, or Purple Sun, or Chain Lightning, and you see a lot of people go flying, but then they just sort of get up again. And I was wondering, like, it looks like Magic feels pretty good, but I was wondering if you thought it needs to be stronger, if you like where it's at, do you think it should be weaker based on your play?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that Bretonia battle, I wouldn't have minded seeing the Chain Lightning do a bit more damage, especially because I put it on zombies as well, as they were just coming through. And I thought that should probably wreck them, right? Because
especially since it could wander off. I figured it should be a very high risk, high reward spell.
They're meant to be meat shields. You're going to throw them in to just tie up and hold up the enemy, but they are, the zombies.
Very low. They're not the lowest tier. Yeah.
You should be able to hack them down with some units, and a spell that is ripping through them with lightning arcing through, I would have thought is going to kill most of them. But as you said, yeah, I think it should be powerful, very powerful, because it has the potential to veer off and hit your own troops and cause insane amounts of damage. So I definitely would like to see it buffed. I think they'd already said by the time I got to that Bretonia build that they had already buffed it, but maybe if they hadn't or not, but if that is the case that they had buffed it, I think it needs buffing more. I guess it may be more a case of individual spells need a bit more buffing here and there, but it did seem like a lot of the spells I have used, for the most part, tend to just knock units away and do some splash damage, but not a lot of direct damage to the unit as a whole, which will result in them losing a lot of units. It seems like a lot of it will either slow them down by kind of scattering them, knocking them over, so they'll have to then slowly get back up,
right,
and then they'll advance on you. So it kind of seems more like a kind of soft bombardment rather than like a heavy one which is going to do lots of damage. The soft bombardment seems to just kind of hit them, knock them down, but then they do get back up again. I mean, that potentially helps you because it breaks up their formation, which makes your attacks more effective, but yeah, I think overall it probably needs boosting up a couple of dials as it currently stands, but again, maybe that's already been addressed. I'm sure.
Well, it seems like it definitely could be a spell by spell basis, because in the Bretonia video, the spell I forget it. I think it was the Curse of Bajuna or something that he lands on the Pegasus Knights. That just tore through their health bar like it was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was that just, I think it was just a hex, wasn't it? That like lowered my armor something awful.
Yeah, which I mean, the Fellbats, from what I understand, are a pretty not heavy damage unit.
Yeah,
because I remember the first time I watched the video, I didn't see the spell either, and I was like, Bretonian Knight or Pegasus Knight should not be getting wrecked that quickly. Like, like I thought they were going to win that fight.
I think it was something like minus 15 armor that it put on my units, which I just got shredded. He timed that really well, and the combination of that I think was a very good example of the kind of the best possible way magic can be used.
Yeah,
because
knowing
he
your
tore
strengths.
down my most effective unit and my most dangerous unit for him to be, which is why he went for it, very early on and committed the Terrorgeist, and that hex to it. So
Yeah, well,
yeah, I mean,
that
yeah,
Terrorgeist is so nasty. Like that's
yeah,
like pretty high on my list of things I'm not looking forward to dealing because the cursed thing has regen too, so it can back off and heal a little bit of health and then come back in, which is spooky.
yeah.
So one question I had, being a dwarf player, I don't know if you had time to play around with the war machines. Do they seem pretty good as far as like accuracy and the damage output? Because I know like the dwarf players, we have no monsters or cavalry, so we're going to be relying really hard on those flame cannons and gyro bombers or like all of our little toys to try and do as much damage as we can. Especially since once those enemy armies get to us, it's almost dangerous to keep firing because then we might be hitting our own guys. So I wonder if you've had any time to play around, because I know the trebuchets for the Bretonnians seem to do pretty well. They look like they were reaping an okay tally out there, but I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the subject.
What kind of just ranged attacks and
Yeah, well, with war machines more specifically, things like I don't know if you had time to play around with like cannons, some of the dwarven artillery. Obviously, Bretonia brings some of theirs. The Empire's got a good amount that they rely on as well. Against armies like Vampire Counts, which have no war machines, so they make up for it with big monsters. And I was wondering if you felt that it was an equivalent exchange, or if maybe war machines are a little bit lower on the tier compared to like things like monsters and such.
I guess it's kind of more of a, I guess maybe a situational thing. There's going to be times where cannons and artillery are going to be more useful. But then I guess potentially flying creatures, which obviously the vampire counts have in excess, are going to be effective pretty much all round in all round scenarios. The Ambush at the Thundering Falls battle that I've played a few times now. You've also got the organ gun and cannons with the dwarfs, and that is really satisfying. I mean, I used the organ gun in manual fire mode to just finish off an Arachnarock and seeing the triple barrel of the guns, just firing shot at this Arachnarock was really satisfying, and that felt pretty solid for what I wanted to do. Lots of damage, and certainly worked from the kind of dwarf play style that I was going with there.
Oh yeah, well, that's awesome to hear. Good.
I think yeah. Relatively speaking, it's there's got to be kind of, with the races being so different and the playstyles that they're offering them purposely to be different. I think there are going to be kind of some cases where stat to stat it's going to seem like an imbalance, but it's more of a what's right to bring in this scenario versus that one. If you don't make the right pairing, then that's where you're going to run into problems, because you won't have kind of, I guess, the right counters for every scenario, and you probably won't 9 times out of 10.
Right.
But I guess
so you'll probably have to play creatively. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's working the tactics to be your best. I mean, vampire counts with the flyers. That's going to be a real advantage. That you're not going to want to go head on with them. You're going to want to tie up the enemy first and then bring them in for flanking attacks, or to potentially head behind enemy lines and take out their artillery and their powerful kind of bombardment support that way.
Yeah, well, it seems to me like flyers are the biggest game changer of everything I've seen. Like Magic seems to have some pretty cool potential, but it's still pretty situational, and you have to use it at the right time. Monsters seem like they're pretty awesome, but it's not completely alien to anything we've seen before. It seems like flyers are the real big new thing that Total War Warhammer's bringing to the table, especially the big ones.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's
I
some
mean,
terrifying big ones out there.
Like seeing the Manicore in Darren's Chaos video. That thing, like when it plows into the dwarves and literally just charges through like 4 units as it's landing, that thing is disgusting looking.
yeah, they've really captured that whole element, and yeah, not only have you got the added kind of layer of magic, you've got that layer now on battles where it's not this, not that Total War battles were ever kind of, the 2D. Kind of flat in, you're on the ground and you've got infantry and you've got cavalry basically as your 2 different types, and obviously within infantry you've got melee infantry and missile infantry and stuff. Now having flyers on top of that, and within that having kind of monstrous flyers and regular flyers, that really adds a fair few more options, and it's going to be very interesting to see the multiplayer scene for this game, and how the tactics are going to come out. I think there's going to be some interesting tactics. I'll definitely be watching players like Agony Duck and what have you that are, they're going to be on those multiplayer builds, from launch like crazy. and looking at what the most efficient ways of
Oh yeah. Well,
building up armies are.
I know I intend to visit multiplayer myself just to see if tabletop strategies translate into the game at all. They probably won't, but I'm hopeful.
I'd definitely something I'd be interested in doing a kind of almost like an analysis video on, actually, to see whether there is a way of kind of using, and it would be, in a way I'd almost like it if it was possible for you to implement tabletop strategies, because I'd love to suddenly see historical Total War vets getting their asses handed to them by tabletop players that are coming in, perhaps playing.
Oh, trust me, that's my dream.
Playing a Total War game for the first time, but using the same strategy they would on tabletop, just potentially tweaked for a real time strategy environment, and just handing it to some some vets. Nothing against Total War and like online multiplayer vets or anything like that, or kind of the competitive, I guess, pro players.
Pro question mark.
Yeah, I mean, we're not a big esports community in that respect.
Yeah.
I guess Arena is our kind of best shot of something like that, really.
Yeah.
But, I guess the clan players, basically, the ones that are really hardcore into their multiplayer, into the meta of the game and things like that, and know their stuff. It would be interesting to see if at launch, at least to start with, whether tabletop strategies would have much of an impact or an advantage over those coming in and trying to adapt traditional Total War multiplayer strategies to encompass magic and monstrous creatures.
Yeah, honestly, I think two armies that from my experience of watching and trying to get as good of a feel as I can for the game, I think dwarf players and greenskin players from tabletop are going to adjust hilariously well to the game. Because for greenskins, it's just run forward and hit everything in your way as quickly and efficiently as possible, whereas dwarves, it's turtle up in the most advantageous terrain position, which dwarf players do on tabletop. If you ever go to a tournament for tabletop, you can always tell who the dwarf player is because they'll have their entire army deployed in a corner on a hill. And they'll never move. They'll just sit there and shoot everything. Granted, war machines in tabletop are disgustingly more powerful than they are in Total War, but you also only get one as opposed to 4 for the price. That being said, though, I know I'm excited to try out a lot of my... because I run a Warhammer school where I've taught people, some of whom I'm sure you know, how to play the game and gotten them used to it. And it's funny to watch people try and bring Total War strategies into Warhammer, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. Spearmen definitely are not as effective in tabletop as they are in Total War.
Yeah.
Poor bastards. But that's all very exciting to hear. The only other thing I'm curious about is some questions for you, just about your experiences, not so much about the game, but just some thoughts. Have you decided who your first campaign was going to be with? I think last time we talked, you were going with dwarves, if I remember right.
I mean, since then, I've probably changed things up quite a bit. I mean, I'm planning to do 3 Let's Plays at launch for Warhammer. There'll be a 4th Let's Play on my channel.
Bless your heart. Oh my god.
I mean, I run 4 regular series Monday to Saturday on my channel, so 3 of those will be Warhammer Let's Plays, and the other one will be, most likely, it's going to be a continuation of my Third Age Isengard campaign at the moment, which will then, when that finishes, eventually turn into just a regular historical Total War to offer those that aren't interested in fantasy some kind of reprieve, I guess, from
those weird history fetishes. Yeah.
So my plan is an Empire and a Vampire Counts campaign, and the third Let's Play I'll be releasing a voting video very soon, and people can vote on Greenskins or Chaos.
Cool.
As that third faction.
Have you picked your legendary lords yet?
Not yet. Again, what I'm probably going to do, seeing as I've kind of picked Empire and Vampire Counts, I'll offer the opportunity for my viewers to vote on which legendary lord I play those campaigns with. I mean, ultimately, I don't mind who I start with, because you can obviously get access to that other legendary lord later on. But I think, I mean, my channel's very much big focus on kind of community interaction and engagement. I mean, anyone can pretty much these days.
I've noticed
can record their gameplay. What I want to do is what I been doing for 6, 7 years, is offering my viewers the opportunity to directly influence how I play. I don't tend to stockpile episodes. I don't tend to record like 10 episodes in one go and then release them. I tend to record them kind of the morning that they're due to be released, and then release them in the evening. And then I eagerly await people's advice and tactics and suggestions, which not only makes me a better player because I'm able to kind of bounce those ideas around and talk to people in the comments and be like, well, what if we tried doing this? And also, when you're kind of zoned in and giving a commentary as well, you often miss a lot of things. As easy as it may sound to do, you do tend to kind of zone out from.
I will gladly vouch.
Details.
I will gladly vouch to say it is stupidly hard to talk and play a game at the same time.
But at the same time, I guess some people might say, well, why don't you just talk later, add the commentary later? But there's something it's a lot more natural adding a live commentary rather than
definitely
afterwards.
Well, so plus, you can't like react to something funny happen. Yeah, in a post recording.
That's why we do it. So. Yeah, I think it is very important for me to involve my community and my viewers at as many points as possible. So while I'm choosing Empire and Vampire counts as 2 of my 3 series, I want to give them the opportunity to be like, shape how I start the Let's Play, shape how I start the campaign with, a different faction. I mean, especially for Empire, where you've got Karl Franz, melee specialist, lots of damage that way, or Balthazar Gelt, magic wielder, and, if you want to see kind of more magic early on, then you're going to want to go for Gelt. Whereas if you just want to hammer things into the ground with Karl Franz, literally, then you're going to want to go with him. And I guess kind of similar with Manfred and
Kimmler.
Kimmler, yeah.
Well, and plus, I think this game is going to be so exciting for communities just because of how it's so lively and active. Just watching the Greenskin campaign where you beat an army and you have to decide, do we eat them or do we ransom them off?
Yeah.
Just crazy over the top options like that. I think it's gonna be really exciting.
How hungry are we?
Yeah, for the I'm sitting here like, man, that's an option for Greenskins. I'm gonna be terrified when ogres show up, because that's all they do is eat everybody. It's gonna be I think it's gonna be super exciting for a lot of communities, especially with starting off in the Empire. It's like, who are you gonna form an alliance with? Are you gonna try and buddy up with the vampire counts? Are you gonna go with the dwarves, Bretonia? Like, you're gonna be a men only treehouse with humans only, or there's so many options with just the grand scale of all the different crazy things in this game. Plus, I can't wait to see all the events. I saw the live stream; they were already hinting at Skaven being active in the world as far as an event is concerned, where they steal people and cause your population to decrease. I thought that was
awesome.
So cool. It was just that, we've only got 6 factions in this game, but yet some of the other factions are already active. I'm so excited to see what the future of this game has. And plus, the free LC release schedule looks fantastic, with new heroes and new lores of magic and new race being Bretonia. Just so much potential for just game-changing new additions on a fairly regular basis too.
Yeah, it seems great to see that kind of schedule that they've sort of released for what their plans are with both paid and free LC content, and the fact that I wasn't sure if with this, because they're planning two more kind of full games which will eventually stitch together, I wasn't sure if we'd see kind of campaign packs, but it looks like that's something they're also looking at doing.
Yeah, which is also super exciting. The game is looking phenomenal on just a lot of different levels. Like, not just talking about the way it actually looks, but just everything they're doing with it. Looks like they've put in so much effort and thought and been very clever about it. Which kudos to them. And I'm already excited for the next 2 games.
Yeah,
and I haven't even got my hands on the first one.
They've done well. They've had a lot of great announcements, obviously, in the last few days with offering mod support. We knew there was going to be, modders would always find a way, whether there was official mod support or not. But now that they've confirmed that there will be from day one, it's great to hear. And they've obviously, already announced that they're working with, a couple of modders already to create a separate Legendary Lord starting position so that you can co-op as the same faction, but with separate Legendary Lords, which is going to be an awesome way to play the game with a friend.
Oh yeah.
That's awesome. The mod to remove regional occupation is something that I'm I'm quite torn about whether I want to use, because in one way I want to give the game a go as intended and as designed, which is obviously with regional occupation. But at the same time, I guess I could argue that I could just use the mod that removes that and um, put the kind of the restrictions on myself that regional occupation would have. But if it feels too linear and too directed away from kind of options to expand that I want to take, I can just break away and do it anyway. So
Yeah.
I'm still in two minds whether or not I will, in this first round of these 3 Let's Plays, include that mod. I guess if I get preview access, then obviously that mod won't be ready, so I'll start it with regional occupation, and I don't ultimately mind that, because I'll, often, with playing or aiming to play start Let's Plays at launch or just before, if you get kind of that preview access, you kind of, with patches, sure, they're save game compatible most of the time, but a lot of the time for those features and patch updates to really kick in and work, you need to start a new campaign, which is, as a Let's Play, you can't do that.
Right.
So it's often until the kind of the second round that you can really evaluate, well, do I need a mod to make this more enjoyable for me, or what have my viewers thought? So I guess I'll probably, depending on when I get access and when I can start releasing content, potentially before release, if a regional occupation mod is there, then I may well add it in, but try and stick to the design choice of regional occupation, unless it really gets to a point where I'm like, I need to break away from this. I need to just conquer whatever I want, sort of thing. But I'm up for giving it a go, at least with this first round of 3.
Well, that's good to hear. Yeah, I know. I know a lot of people seem to be very happy about the decision. Giving people choices is never a bad thing, in my opinion. So it's definitely glad. I think my first campaign, I'll definitely be playing it just as it's released. Which I don't even know if the mods will be out the day of. I know that they're saying that's very up in the air at the moment.
Yeah, they're trying to do it, but I mean,
and God knows I'm not that patient.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Yeah, most of us are probably going to jump in, see if we like regional occupation as it stands, and then go from there for second and third campaigns. Obviously, for the nutters like me that are going to try and do 3 campaigns simultaneously as regular uploads, although I've also got a versus campaign planned as well. So technically, there's 4 Warhammer Let's Plays that will be featured on my channel in some form or another. 3 of them Monday to Saturday. It's gonna be busy.
Oh yeah, I think I'm only doing 1. Maybe a co-op campaign or 2 with like some of my higher up patrons, but I do not envy you on that particular scale.
Yeah,
Goodness gracious.
I'll kick myself later for that.
Well, but it's certainly an exciting time. I mean,
Definitely.
being a Warhammer fan, it's like stupid exciting these days. What with Dawn of War 3 just being announced and all sorts of other crazy things coming. Like literally,
I mean, Sega's. I guess it's obviously probably down to CA and Relic and their cinematic and animation teams and what have you, marketing teams. But they are so on point with cinematic trailers. I mean, that Dawn of War 3 announcement was just spectacular. It was absolutely awesome. And I mean, as much as I want to be like, no, don't get on the hype train. I've already got a ticket. I've already gone on the first trip. I bought a second ticket. I'm back on the hype train.
Yeah.
I've already been to the destination and back, and I'm going back again because it.
Well,
it
and
just felt awesome.
Oh yeah, I couldn't. I was just so happy because I thought it was never going to happen after who was it? THQ that went under.
Yeah,
and Relic got bought up.
I was quite glad that actually Sega kind of pulled them in, because I knew that if they had the opportunity to kind of create more games, they definitely get the funding, but it was whether or not they would actually kind of just slowly dissolve down, just offering post release support for Company Heroes
it could have been
whether they ever go anywhere else.
It could have been Microsoft that bought them up, and we all know how that would have gone. They'd be making mobile games.
Yeah, or just close down like 6 months later. Yeah. I'm really glad they made that announcement, and that is gonna it's gonna make them a ton of money. That's gonna sell well. They're certainly looking to incorporate the best elements they've said from Dawn of War 1 and Dawn of War 2. I can see there's some conflict already about the choice of, I think it's just 3 factions to start with, and obviously
Orcs, Eldar, and Space Marines. Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be some kind of conflict about that in terms of DLC and stuff. I kind of want to just jump in and see whether the content that is there for the base game is solid enough. If it is, I don't have a problem. If
Yeah.
it feels
Well,
like they could really
there's so
do with
much.
more,
Yeah, there's so much up in the air at this point.
yeah,
It's
just
ridiculous.
It's early announcement time, so I guess
Yeah.
I think it's 2017 before we're really kind
Yep.
of
Uh-huh.
before it'll be out. But yeah, I mean this is a great time for Warhammer fans, both kind of fantasy and 40k.
Mhm.
And I mean for Sega, they must be to be fair, you know, they must be rubbing their hands with, you know, and just dancing in money. To be fair, because
Oh, I'm sure.
they're about to probably smash the Warhammer Fantasy setting with their award-winning Total War series, and they've just hyped up, you know,
The irony of which is not lost on Warhammer fans, seeing as there's
Yeah.
no longer a Warhammer Fantasy setting.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, yeah, and then with
Damn
the
Games
announcement of
Workshop.
War 3, they've just animated all those that keep kind of looking at Warhammer, Total Warhammer, and go, God, this would be great if it was 40k.
Yeah, and then it
Now
falls
they've-
out of the
and now
sky,
they've
right?
got it. Yeah, you know, you've got that perfect pairing. I mean, Sega Warhammer wise is covered for both kind of separate IPs that they have within the universe and stuff. So it's just going to be.
Yeah, they're definitely
should
looking
a
to
pretty
be
solid time. Whether you like Sega or not, you know,
they're
gonna,
definitely turning out to be bedfellows with Games Workshop, it seems.
They look like they've got some pretty good stuff coming, very very soon.
Well, and good companies, you know.
Yeah, they've got.
You know,
they've got
these are
Relic
not bad
and-
developers by any
and
means.
CA, yeah. I've loved both the products, you know, and series that both studios have produced, and yeah, I think, if I was a Sega exec, I'd be pretty darn happy about the position, you know, where you are in the games industry right now for PC gaming, especially.
Well, just stupid exciting times. I mean, I know, you know, we've got Battlefleet Gothic just came out this month or last month, and Mordheim City of the Damned is doing really well. Vermintide's doing well.
Yeah, Vermintide's
and
solid.
There's a new game that I've been playing around with that I got a review copy for called Man of War Corsair, which is based naval battles in the Warhammer Seas, and it is super fun. I'm not gonna lie. I had my doubts and I started playing it. It's like, well, shit, this is actually really enjoyable.
It's a good time to like anything Warhammer at the moment. To be fair, there seems to be so many games. So many good games, because there's always been loads of Warhammer games. There's a lot of solid.
I'm on my final campaign in Battle March, which it wasn't a bad game, but it wasn't a great game.
It's nice to see some solid Warhammer entries that aren't sodding hex-based tile games.
Yeah, or people taking advantage of the nostalgia.
It's all you get, and it's just like, oh god, yeah, another hex-based tile game that's got some Warhammer stuff to it. Great, yeah, cool. It's just it's the same as every other hex-based tile game, because it's normally made probably by the same company, and you're like, oh, didn't you make like 50 of these already? And so you're not adding anything to it. But yeah, it seems like it's going to be a really solid time for Warhammer in general, and yeah, Sega looks like they've got a good. I mean, obviously we've got Warhammer 2 and 3 Total Wars, you know, coming at some point.
Can't wait.
We've got, you know, those DLC campaign packs and stuff apparently planned. We've got free LC planned. It's going to be busy, and I mean, on top of all that, for CA as well, which is got a bit of a curveball, I guess. It's going to be interesting to see how this goes, and I expect it to be hugely popular, and for CA probably really broaden their market, because they'll be going on. I would assume they'll be going onto a console as well with Halo Wars 2.
Yeah, they're looking to becoming a potentially very big. I mean, they've always been like one of the biggest in the strategy market, but it looks like they might be expanding to like very big notoriety soon.
Yeah,
which is almost spooky, you know.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that kind of cross-platform is something. I mean, obviously the question always comes up. The discussion always comes up, like, oh, it'd be great if Total War could be on PS4, which, you know, comes from console. It comes from console gamers. You know, it comes from console gamers that see the Total War series being played by someone on PC, and they go, oh, can I get this on Xbox One? Because, you know, they don't know. Yeah, and it's probably one of the biggest series that is PC exclusive.
Not for lack of trying. Not for lack of trying. It's just, man, that's such a tall order. That is such a tall order.
It would be interesting to see if the development, because as I said, I assume that Halo Wars 2 will be a PC and Xbox One launch. It would be very interesting to see if, having then worked and developed Halo Wars 2 and building from scratch a a team that can work on both PC and console at the same time and make game for that within an RTS scenario. It'd be very interesting to see if expect to see it immediately. I expect to see it many years down the line, but I wonder if that might be the start of a potential attempt to offer some kind of console version. Now I know that might frighten a lot of people because they'll be like, no, it'll be dumbed down, it'll be changed too much, but sometimes you do see a fair few significant differences between a PC version of a game and a console version. Beyond just visuals, you often see some quite drastic UI changes, and that would be something that would have to be taken into account. I mean, Total War right now is playable with a Steam controller. You can do it. I'm not saying it's a good experience. It's an awkward experience. It is something that you would really have to train yourself hard to, and it's something that I've wondered that maybe a couple of months down the line I might try making kind of a big project out of it, of attempting to build a cheap £300 to £400 PC to mimic the same specifications of a PS4 or Xbox One, and then solely playing Total War with the Steam controller to offer that experience of being like, is it ever going to be possible? Because tech-wise, we're going to get there. Consoles will eventually get there in terms of with the power and the processing units and stuff, or it will be optimized or tweaked down to work better with those units. I guess that because, in a way, you look at sales of Total War and you maybe hear that they just finally reached 1 million sales of a game that they released a couple of years ago, and that is huge for them. But imagine that on a console market. That would be huge. And I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I'm not certainly saying that they should expand to consoles, because, I jump back onto my chair right now and go, no, PC for life, that's where Total War should stay. But it'd be interesting to see, 10 years' time, where is Total War? Is it still on PC, or has it expanded to consoles as well? I mean, maybe in 10 years' time, consoles are just PCs, and because they are PCs in a form, in a different form factor.
Pre-made PCs, yes.
Yeah, just 5 years dated tech. But yeah, I find that potentially interesting to see if that's ever something we could do, because you have USB ports on PS4 and Xbox. You can plug external mice and keyboards into them, so is there really anything to stop them going onto those units? I guess it's the input, which is the controller. The Steam controller, with the options to remap it to pretty much anything you want, is a very powerful tool, but does it work? My own experience with the Steam controller and Attila that I tried out a while back is it does work, but it's bloody awkward coming from keyboard and mouse.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Well, and we'll have to see. So I've got, 2 last questions for you, and then I think we'll wrap this up. And they're very easy questions, I think.
Okay.
So the first is, based on how you've played or units that you've gotten to see, do you have something that you would say, this is my most excited unit that I want to use or have gotten to use in Total War Warhammer, whether it be a monster or a unit or a war machine or a character or whatever?
Oh God, it's technically an easy question, but it's also a bloody hard question. I'm gonna say any kind of spellcaster right now, just because I do love the layer that magic gives you. I mean, that Bretonnia battle, the Enchantress Chain Lightning just looked awesome. So yeah.
So Lord of Heavens is a close contender then.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, and then the second one is there any? Do you have? I probably know the answer to this question. Do you have anything that you've seen or fought in the game so far that you dread, don't want to see across the table at all? From a dear God, I have to deal with this thing now for a fight.
I guess we brought it up in our last Warcast podcast recording, which was that when you fight a battle in an unwalled settlement, it plays an open land battle, so there's no representation of the town that you might technically be garrisoned in, which for me is quite immersion breaking, because I would want to try and have some kind of village representation or town representation that I'd be fighting over. Sure, you could argue that no, you're advancing out of the town or the village because you don't want to damage it or cause any problems there to fight this battle. But to me, it kind of seems very counterintuitive intuitive that my garrison would sally out to meet the enemy when they're the ones being attacked and they're holed up in this town. Sure, it's got no walls, so I don't expect it to be a full out siege, but
I had not heard that. That's strange. That's news to me.
I don't think it's really been said too much, but it was something we saw at the Vampire Counts preview event and at a capture event at CA, and because Warrior was about to capture a battle, and he thought it was going to be a siege because he was attacking this town, this unwalled town, and then suddenly it was just an open field battle, and he was like, "What? Well, there's nothing here," and that for me really, I know that they've specifically said that they felt Attila was very much heavy siege focus. You'd siege to siege to siege, but you know, you had these intricate towns and watchtowers that, sure, there weren't walls, but you still had to approach it differently. I know they've gone in a very different direction with sieges, with a one wall or, you know, corner wall linear approach. You know, you attack forward, you get to the walls, you fight on the walls, and then you've got larger streets for better pathfinding for the AI. And I don't mind it being a function over form system for big sieges, but I am very disappointed that there is no representation of villages or towns when you're defending them unwalled. That is, because just like, why would I want to? I'm defending a patch of grass rather than these poor villagers.
Hopefully, that's a mod we see sooner than later. Then
I hope so. Yeah, I hope that's something they can add in some. You know, okay, I get it that maybe if they did add in towns and stuff like that, it would be a pathfinding issue for the way that they coded the AI for this game. But you know, have wide streets then. Have just a central plaza somewhere with a couple of buildings scattered around it. Have it maybe just behind me off map, and I'm just deployed directly in front of the village. Just something to give me that sense of this is what I'm fighting for, rather than, oh look, we've stupidly decided to leave the safety of the castle or the town that we were defending. Oh, it didn't have walls, but oh look, there's the enemy. Let's march towards them. There.
Yeah, really, I'd much rather fight, especially if I'm going to go up against like
I mean,
dwarves or something. I'd rather have a building.
Narrow streets to force the enemy to 2-to-1 scenarios. I want to be able to break them that way, and it seems like unfortunately that hasn't been kind of a thought that the designers went for. But they've got two more games that they want to bring out with the Total Warhammer kind of license and IP.
Yeah.
So
and hopefully that's I could see that being modded in very quickly, because I bet this don't bother a lot of people. But in any event, that's all the time we've got, or at least I've got. So Lionheart, thank you so much for coming by. This was a blast. Again, lots of really good information, and thanks so much for answering some of the questions and all that other stuff.
But cheers for having me on again.
Probably will not be seeing you until the game comes out at the very least. Good luck to you in all your endeavors. If you get a review copy, I look forward to seeing your thoughts on the final product of the game. And until then, everyone have a great night. Thanks again, Lionheart, for coming by.
Watch out for chaos.
Oh man, ever since that Kolek video, I've been hearing the call, man. I've been hearing the call, and it's getting harder to resist.
Too late.
All right.
Already corrupted.
All right. See you later, everyone. Bye.